While the New York Mets suffered an embarrassing 13-1 loss, the biggest thing that they lost on Monday was their starting third baseman. Guillorme hits the IL with a groin strain. When will they just go for it and promote Brett Baty to replace him? We're going to discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, we're going to talk about the game in a little bit, but I'm not really rushing to talk about a 13-1 loss here, when the biggest story of the day is that Guillorme has hit the IL with that groin strain. The estimated timetable right now is 4 to 6 weeks. Think about it. We're in the middle of August here. That's dangerous. I mean, that's potentially season threatening. You know, if he has a setback, if it takes a little longer to heal, we could be looking at Guillorme not getting back until the very end of the regular season. And that's even if he hits his actual timetable, you're talking mid-September. And that's on the short end. So, look, this Mets team is going to need a third baseman to step up. And right now, it seems like the plan is Eduardo Escobar every day, which I think makes sense to a certain extent. But everybody today was calling for a promotion of Brett Baty. I think in these times, of course, the fan base wants to see the top prospect called up because there's some buzz and excitement that comes with that. Having a Brett Baty would infuse this team with some energy. And obviously, you know, the ceiling of a Brett Baty is much higher than Eduardo Escobar playing every day or really anything else the Mets could put together right now. But instead, they go with Devin Marrero. And the idea is here's a guy who's good defensively and can be your backup shortstop. And I wouldn't worry about it. I know Mets fans were freaking out about this today. And it compounds itself when you have the loss, when you have, you know, Vaughn Grisham gets called up by the Braves after playing 20 some odd games in you know, double A, barely had any sample size there, as opposed to a Baty who spent time in double A last year and then the full season there this year. And here's Vaughn Grisham up with the Braves, and you're playing the Braves right away. And you're seeing they have Grisham and Harris, who are just two dynamic young talents that are really helping that team. I want to start there before I get into why I still would call up Brett Baty. I'm going to explain the Mets' rationale first, and then I'm going to tell you why I think their rationale is wrong, okay? So bear with me. But here's what I believe they're thinking. For one, they weren't sure what was going on with Guillorme. Was this going to be a long IL stint? They found out after some imaging that it is. But prior to that, they were just, you know, trying to figure out what the best solution was and skewing defense in the meantime instead of making the rash decision to promote your top prospect. I think this was a very simple short-term fix. I don't think that they really do believe that Devin Marrero is going to be playing significant innings for this team. I think that's all right, he's a break glass in case of emergency guy that you'll use if you have to, but really it's more of a, you know, vote of confidence in Eduardo Escobar to get back to playing every single day as a switch hitting third baseman. Now, with that said, I don't know if that is the full plan. Buck Showalter, when he answers questions, he's very focused on the day. So you have people who are taking his quotes where he says that right now Brett Baty and Mark Vientos weren't considered to be promoted as okay, well, they're not going to be promoted for the rest of the season. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that's Buck Showalter answering the question. And there was a very specific part of his answer where he said, as of now at 4:30, that's what we're thinking. I think this is all about this current series. And for this specific series against this Braves team, maybe this was not the ideal time to call on a Brett Baty, to have him rush down. You're also talking about one of your top prospects making their major league debut. There's a lot that goes with that. There's, of course, setting him up for success, and having him rushed into the scene probably wouldn't have been the wisest move. Now, could they be making arrangements for him to come down for the end of this series to meet them in Philly? For all we know, that could be happening. But right now, I think this is very simply a vote of confidence, as I said, in Eduardo Escobar, and the Mets are just being patient. We've seen their patience pay off a lot of other times this season. So I think you have to be a little bit careful about getting too carried away here. The Mets lost the game tonight. Really unfortunate that they got destroyed. Okay. Um, but they just won a series against the Phillies. They just swept the series before that against the Reds. And before that, they beat this exact same Braves team 4 out of 5 games. In the final 2 games of this series, they'll have Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom on the hill. They have an opportunity with Taijuan Walker to go out against Charlie Morton and get a victory. And this Mets lineup, with or without a Louis Guillorme, can certainly still score runs on a Charlie Morton and win that game. And if they split the first 2 games and head into the final 2 games of the series with Scherzer and deGrom, you're not as concerned. Now, the loss of Louis Guillorme, I do think, is a massive one. You're talking about a guy that does so much for you defensively, that gives you versatility at third and second base. Eduardo Escobar does that, but nowhere near at the same capabilities defensively. Guillorme's glove and his ability to give great at-bats against right-handed pitching has basically won him that starting third base job. And it is unfortunate, once again, very similar to last season when a lot of injuries would have opened the door for Guillorme, where suddenly he gets hurt again, and now he is missing an opportunity to go out there and be a really big contributor to this team down the stretch. I think this injury is massive, and that's why I still think that all roads will lead back to Brett Baty, because ultimately we have a big enough sample size this year of Eduardo Escobar just coming up short. So that's what I want to talk about next year. I want to talk about Eduardo Escobar because now the onus is on him, and why I still believe Brett Baty is a better solution for the Mets right now. But before we get into that, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor, and it is absolutely delicious. It's the indulgent cookie dough flavor, comes covered in chocolate, and that's right. Built has done it again. This flavor is incredible. The cookie dough chunk puffs are light and chewy in texture. They have real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. You get all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, this is actually healthy for you. You're only talking about 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to built.com to snag a box for you and your family. It'll be the perfect treat. You might even want to find a good hiding place where you can hoard them for yourself. That is how good these the cookie dough chunk puffs are. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or you're just looking to grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar for you. They taste better than a candy bar. You can ditch the calories, the fat, and the sugar, and instead grab yourself a Built bar. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at built.com. Let's just be brutally honest here. Eduardo Escobar's having a terrible season. That's just the reality, okay? I think he's a great clubhouse guy. I think that in some respects, the Mets have been better to have him just in the mix this year. But you still look at the production they've got from this guy. He's a 216 hitter. His on base percentage is 269. Slugging percentage is 384. These are really bad numbers across the board. 12 home runs have been a nice addition, but not nearly worth it considering all the other stuff that's come with it. His chase rate's bad, his whiff rate's bad, strikeout rate's bad, expected batting average, expected slugging, hard hit percentage, average exit velocity. None of it's really good for Eduardo Escobar. And the other factor is the defense hasn't been good. He's in the 4th percentile among all fielders in outs above average. That means he's in the bottom 5% of the league when it comes to defense. At third base, he has been worth -6 outs above average this year. That's not good. Now, I saw Anthony DiComo wrote a story about why the Mets did not promote Brett Baty and Mark Vientos. And essentially what he says in the story is the Mets brass does not think that those two guys are ready to play third base at the major league level. While I can sympathize with that, especially with Mark Vientos, that's a valid argument with him. Brett Baty is at this point at least a slightly below average defender, but not JD Davis at third base. Not what Mark Vientos would be at third base. And honestly, I think he might even be better than Eduardo Escobar. I don't think that you can use defense as an excuse to not call on Brett Baty when your incumbent is one of the worst defenders in baseball. To me, those two things don't align. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know if that's just a rationale that was used because the Mets are hesitant to push a Brett Baty. And maybe their thought process is we really want Brett to get time in AAA. And we don't want to risk his development to improve our season when they believe they can get by with Eduardo Escobar. And they're just putting faith in the veteran who's been there and done it before, who's a leader in that clubhouse to step up when this team needs him. Maybe that is what the case is here. But I already read off the numbers for Eduardo Escobar. You look this year at Brett Baty's numbers against right-handed pitching. Now, this is a left-handed batter against lefties. He's got a 798 OPS. Not bad. 243 hitter, 312 on base, 486 slugging. It does have 4 home runs and 5 doubles, and these are numbers based in Double-A Binghamton. Not terrible. Pretty solid, honestly, if you're talking about an everyday player, but he wouldn't have to face left-handed pitching on this team. Escobar has fared well against lefties. That's why he was platooning with Guillorme. So you can go back to that with Brett Baty. What you want, though, is his bat in there almost every day against right-handed pitching. What he did this year in Binghamton against righties, he hit 330 with a 429 on base and a 559 slugging percentage, a 988 OPS. He had 15 home runs and 17 doubles, 32 extra base hits. What are we doing here? I mean, seriously, you're trying to win this year. Why not call him up? Now, I get that there's a difference here comparing him to Von Grisham and Michael Harris. I talked about it a little bit in the first segment. To me, the difference is those two guys are exceptional defenders. So even if they faltered a little bit offensively at the big league level, they had the glove to fall back on. Baty doesn't necessarily have that. Everything that I had heard previous to now was that the defense was on a steady improvement, but maybe the Mets still felt like he needs more time at AAA to continue to progress as a third baseman, and they were earmarking next year as the time for him. With that said, Brett Baty cannot be a worse player than Eduardo Escobar right now. I just don't believe that to be the case. Even if you're calling him early, I think Brett Baty gives you a better chance to win games. And if that's the case, and you're talking about a hitter that raked in Double-A, that has gone to Triple-A and has continued to have success in 6 games. He's hitting 364 now in Triple-A. He's 8 for 22, and he's drawn 3 walks. He only has 6 strikeouts, but still, he's getting on base at a 462 clip in his first week in Triple-A. He's having good at-bats against that, next level pitching. The difference between Double-A pitching and Triple-A pitching is Triple-A pitchers are going to game plan for your weaknesses, whereas a Double-A pitcher might, gear towards their strengths. Regardless, he has been successful against the best of the best in Double-A, some of those top tier prospects that have really good stuff. And now he's facing the Triple-A pitchers, some of them who probably has some big league experience, and he's hit the ground running at that level. I'd call him up. I don't know if I'd say this series. Maybe it's in Philly. Maybe you kind of get him prepared a little bit. You give him a couple days mentally to get ready for it. And after this series in Atlanta, you have Brett Baty meet you in Philly. But right now, the idea that Eduardo Escobar is going to be the answer for the final, whatever it is. I mean, how many games you got left? You're at 116 played. So what is that? 46 games left. The idea that Escobar is going to shoulder that burden down the stretch, to me, I just think this team needs a little bit more upside. And the idea that you have to have a backup shortstop when Francisco Lindor is playing every single day, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think that you can go out, you can let Eduardo Escobar be your emergency shortstop. If you need to, you got to get through a game. You got to get through a game. We saw Marcano play third base, and the Mets got through that one. Right now, do what you have to do. Get the best possible bat up. And I think Baty is that. I think he'll give you a much better chance than Escobar. And defensively, like I said, say what you want about Brett Baty. You're talking about him replacing a guy that has been one of the worst defenders in baseball this year based on outs above average. So I just don't view that as a justifiable argument. We'll see what the Mets do. I'd even be happier if they want to call up Mark Vientos. I'd be happy with that as well. I don't think that the fit makes as much sense because he doesn't complement Escobar in a platoon, and the defense is going to be even worse for Vientos at third. But I still think there's something to be said about bringing a rookie up to provide a jolt to this team. And I think Brett Baty is the one that really does fit a need for the Mets right now that they should call on. So we'll see if they do that at some point this week or in the coming weeks. For now, though, it's Eduardo Escobar. You just got to hope that he can play to the back of the baseball card and not what he's done so far this season. But I will discuss the 13-1 loss and also the fact that Carlos Carrasco left his start with an injury. What do the Mets do there? We'll get to all that in just a minute. But first, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way for you to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for your odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting to scores and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. It was a really rough game for your New York Mets on Monday night. Carlos Carrasco got knocked around in his 2 innings of work, gave up 3 runs, but more importantly, there was a rain delay. He had to sit aside for 55 minutes, steps back on the mound, and his final pitch of the second inning, he left with a tight side. His left side was tight. Obviously, you think oblique. We'll see what happens here. He's going to get an MRI. Carrasco was pitching great prior to this injury, so this could be a big blow to the Mets. Luckily, though, this is one area where they have depth. You got David Peterson, who can fill right in. He just had to start the other day, so he would be in line to pitch the next time Carrasco was set to go. Peterson likely would have got a spot start anyway with the doubleheader in Philly on Saturday, so maybe that becomes Peterson and Trevor Williams and a bullpen day, and you don't love that, but the Mets have coverage with Peterson. They still have Tyler McGill, who's supposed to be gearing up for a bullpen role, but theoretically could still slide into the rotation. And you have Joe Lucchesi as well. So I don't think this is the biggest of concerns for the Mets. The Louis Guillorme injury still looms much larger, but Carrasco was pitching really well. So it does hurt this team to lose him. I just think that they can get by with David Peterson in the meantime. You go to this game, though, and I don't know what you want me to talk about. You want me to talk about the fact that Spencer Strider actually had a pretty good outing after all of the trash he talked, backed it up a little bit, going 5 innings, although the Mets once again were able to get him out of the game early. You want to talk about how Joely Rodriguez gave up a run, went 1 2/3. Donis Medina did not look good. He gave up 6 runs, 5 of them earned. You have Michael Givens, another rough outing for him in a Mets uniform, 3 earned runs. Or do you want to talk about Darren Ruff, who gave the Mets the only good pitching of the night? And yes, that is the position player, Darren Ruff, who gave the Mets 2 scoreless innings at the end of the game. Sometimes throwing strikes and not throwing hard can work out for you. Trust me. As a pitcher myself back in the day, I was an expert at just that. Soft pitching, but throwing strikes can do wonders for you. You can get a lot of outs that way. But Darren Ruff did a nice job saving the bullpen a little bit. And the bottom line here when it comes to this series, look, it's 1 loss. It's not the end of the world. It might feel like it if you're waking up and you're driving to work right now and you just either watch some of the game or reading the box score and you're thinking about Carrasco's injury and Guillorme being out and you're already getting to that point where you're doomsday Mets fan projecting the next 3 games against the Braves, automatically assuming they'll all be losses, imagining just a complete collapse by this team. Have faith in the representative sample size. I look at the 115 games the Mets played before tonight. And I think, that's maybe the team that I'm going to kind of fall back on, as opposed to the one that had a rain delay, lost their starting pitcher in the second inning, and, had Adonis Medina pitching to a Braves lineup. This Braves lineup, as great as they've been this year, what they've shown me based on their record against sub 500 teams and teams over 500 is they're very good at hitting mediocre pitching. Let's see what they do against Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom at the end of this series. And we'll see how they fare against Taijuan Walker. If they beat up on Taijuan Walker, all right, they'll be in the driver's seat in this series. But I look at Charlie Morton. I think the Mets can certainly get to him. And I don't believe the Braves have a massive edge in this upcoming game. And if the Mets win it, well, look, you split the first two games leading into Scherzer deGrom. And if you're the Braves, suddenly you're on your heels. So it's one loss. I'm not overreacting to it. If they lose with Taijuan Walker on the mound, I won't be overreacting to that. The fact is, this series ends with Scherzer and deGrom, and that still is the biggest differentiating factor with the Mets and any other team in baseball. We're going to see it this week. We're going to see Scherzer again at the end of that series against the Phillies. I would hold off on your panic. Let's see how this Mets team bounces back. They've done it all year. And while you could be concerned about a Guillorme or a Carrasco, I still will look at the lineup tomorrow, and you know who's going to be in it? Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Daniel Vogelback, Mark Canha maybe, Jeff McNeil. Like, there's still a lot of really good players on this team that can go out and win a baseball game. We'll see how the Mets bounce back from here. I do want to see Brett Baty, but if we don't, that does not mean that this Mets team suddenly can't win baseball games. They're just going to have other guys step up in place of Louis Guillorme, who has been really good this year. And honestly, considering the fact that so many people at the beginning of this season didn't believe in Louis Guillorme the way I did and thought that he was just a light-hitting utility backup infielder, to see the reaction that his injury has brought today, in some respects, is a positive development for me, just in relation to Guillorme's career and the perception of him as a player. I think people have now realized what this guy brings to the table, and it's going to be a big loss. But if we've seen anything this year, it's that this Mets team has responded to adversity very well. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan has you covered with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.